Okay, welcome back after the break. Please take your seats. It's my pleasure to announce our next speaker, Professor Witold Płotka. Witold also works with us for a long time now, and he is a regular participant of our meetings, of our conferences. And today, Professor Płotka speaks about Twardowski on feelings, desires, and the will.
Thank you for this presentation, and of course, thank you to the organizers, to the organizer for organizing this great event. I'm really happy being here, and thank you for being with me. So indeed, my paper will deal with Kazimierz Twardowski's account of feelings, desires, and the will. To phrase it differently, I explore parts of his philosophy of mind. It is the field of examination that today is called emotional phenomenology. My two central questions are as follows. How shall one classify feelings as different from desires? Is the will a subclass of feelings? Both questions lead us to the central point of disagreement between Twardowski and Franz Brentano, Twardowski's teacher from Vienna, who argued that feelings are not different from the will, and they ultimately form a unitary class of mental phenomena that is called by Brentano love and hate phenomena. Twardowski does not argue with Brentano in this regard, as he argues, he does not agree with Brentano in this regard, as he argues against the unification. And he claims that feelings and the will form separate classes. This claim, however, is often misunderstood. For instance, Liliana Albertazzi writes that, and I quote from her text, Twardowski took from Brentano the triple division of psychic phenomena, that is, the three ways in which we can refer to an object, end of quotation. So this is Albertazzi. In what follows, contrary to Albertazzi's claim, I argue that Twardowski preferred a four-class taxonomy of mental phenomena over Brentano's tripartite division. To make the whole picture more complex, it can be argued that Twardowski, while adopting a critical attitude toward Brentano, in this particular case, was inspired by Christian von Ehrenfels, another student of Brentano. This claim, though important, will be not elaborated by me today. Instead, I want to focus on Twardowski exclusively. This being said, an introductory note regarding sources can be helpful. After his move to Lvov from Vienna in 1895, Twardowski gave a few courses on the interesting topic. First, he gave a 1896-97 course entitled The Psychology of Feelings, which was repeated and extended in the winter semester of 1903-04, followed by the lecture entitled The Psychology of Desires and the Will, which was given in the summer term, the same academic year. Whereas the course on feelings establishes the basics of the classificatory program of psychology, The latter course on desires and the will presents a detailed discussion with Brentano's arguments. Twardowski's texts on emotional phenomenology were for years hardly accessible, especially the first one was handwritten, so it was really hard to access this text. Of course, the course on the psychology of desires and the will, so the last one, was partly published in 1902. However, this was not a critical edition. Due to excellent work of Aleksandra Chorecka, together with Jacek Jadacki and Anna Brożek, all texts are available in Twardowski's Inedita book series, published in Polish. These texts present details of Twardowski's account of feelings, desires, and the will, and as such, are a central point of reference for me in the present study. My paper is structured as follows. First, I summarize parts of Twardowski's arguments against Brentano's unitary thesis. Next, I analyze Twardowski's account of feelings as different from desires. Finally, I focus on the phenomenon of the will. In conclusion, I will go back to Albertazzi's thesis to show why we need a more nuanced picture of Twardowski's emotional phenomenology. Brentano's project of psychology was designed to accomplish the classificatory purpose. It strives to classify different classes of mental phenomena. Brentano famously or infamously argues that there are three fundamental classes of mental phenomena, including presentations, judgments, and so-called love and hate phenomena. I will discuss only the last class, which encompasses both feelings, for instance, pleasure, enjoyment, and the will, for instance, striving, desiring. I intentionally present an object as something good or bad within this class of phenomena. And for this reason, I desire to make it happen. For instance, I know that it is good if a conference paper fits the time frame. So I desire to limit myself to fit the time frame ascribed to my conference slot. For Brentano, this is one mental state. Why? Let me consider one of his arguments, which can be called the distinction argument. It goes as follows. Mental phenomena, among which there is no fundamental distinction, belong to the same class. So this is the first premise of this argument. And it is strictly connected with the classificatory program of Brentano's project of psychology. The second premise, there is no fundamental distinction between the phenomena of feelings and the will. Therefore, and we are going to the conclusion, the phenomena of feelings and the will belong to the same class. To prove that the second premise of this argument is true, Brentano formulated an additional argument, which can be treated as a wider argumentative strategy to show that the conclusion is true, which refers to the testimony of inner experience, immediate experience. Thus, immediate experience manifests that it is difficult and even impossible to distinguish between feelings and volitional acts. In this vein, he holds that both subclasses present a rich spectrum of various phenomena that seem to be distinguishable only in extreme cases, in extreme forms, but no clear-cut criterion for the division of mediate cases can be formulated. Twardowski does not accept these arguments. First, for Twardowski, Brentano's, as I put it, distinction argument is questionable because the second premise of this argument is not sound. Brentano attempts to justify the second premise by referring to immediate experience, but following Twardowski, immediate experience shows that there is a difference between feelings and the will. In particular, Twardowski suggests that the distinction argument presupposes so-called fundamental and secondary differences, which are understood with respect to the way of experiencing and defining. Whereas fundamental differences can be experienced, though not defined. So I feel something, but I'm not sure what I feel. I cannot define it. So the secondary differences can be both experienced and defined. Nonetheless, this distinction is vague, claims Twardowski. Moreover, the fact that Brentano defines a series of such differences in his Psychology from Empirical Standpoint, Book 2, Chapter 7, Section 7, supports this fact that Brentano draws differences between different phenomena. This fact supports the hypothesis that feelings and the will are in fact, contrary to Brentano, distinct if we can define those differences, right? Thus, Twardowski's critique of the distinction argument is a reductio ad absurdum, as it pinpoints that this argument contradicts the framework of Brentano's program. So far, so good. So this was critical part. It's much easier to criticize others, right? But if feelings are different from the will, how shall they be understood? To address this question, Twardowski uses indirect proofs by examining the theories of Carl Georg Lange and William James. Those theories reduce feelings to sensations. In light of these theories, according to Twardowski, feelings are not the most basic class of phenomena. Sensations are more fundamental. These theories, however, are false because they are based on the questionable assumption that feelings have only a physiological basis. Twardowski considers two examples. The phenomenon of thinking without physiological stimulation, which can cause relevant feelings, and the phenomenon of complete anesthesia, in which one does not experience sensations, even though one feels emotions. So these arguments of Twardowski, which refer to inner experience, and by the way were taken from Stumpf, are in line with Brentano's psychology, for they invoke the evidence of immediate perception. Consequently, theories that reduce feelings to sensations and physiological reactions are false on account of their contradicting the facts. As a result, Twardowski accepts the thesis that feelings cannot be reduced to sensations, and he observes that feelings are characterized by quality, degree, duration, intentionality, and being based on a presentation. By quality, Twardowski understands pleasure and displeasure. Importantly, both qualities can be instantiated simultaneously. Of course, not in one feeling, but in at least two feelings that are intentionally directed toward two different objects. By degree, Twardowski refers to liveliness of feelings, which can be higher, as in the case of pleasure, or lower, as in the case of pain. In this respect, Twardowski adds that it is easier to ascribe a certain degree under two conditions: if two feelings have the same quality and are directed toward the same object. The fact that feelings have varying degrees justifies Twardowski's criticism of Brentano's argument, as discussed by me earlier, the distinction argument. So, by duration, Twardowski understands a non-controversial, in my opinion, feature, property of feelings, that they are temporal and experienced in time. Twardowski also notices some laws governing feelings. For example, features of degree and duration are correlated. For instance, a short yet strong feeling is equivalent to a longer yet weaker feeling. For instance, he gives a few examples: a tooth extraction and a toothache. Alternatively, the stronger the degree, the shorter the corresponding feeling, and vice versa. The feature of intentionality describes feelings as directed toward an object. For example, I enjoy something. I assume I'm amused by something. However, the object is not given in feeling directly, but, as the last feature describes, on the basis of a presentation, and this last characterization of a feeling, of course, is in line with Brentano, because according to Brentano, all mental phenomena are based upon presentations. Overall, Twardowski understands feelings as mental phenomena that are sui generis. They are intentionally directed toward an object, apprehended as pleasant or unpleasant, wherein the pleasure or displeasure of a phenomenon has a certain degree, and said phenomenon lasts in time. What is important? Twardowski holds that feelings are different from desires, and desires cannot be understood as a separate class of mental phenomena. In the 1903-04 course on the psychology of feelings, Twardowski opts for what can be called a reductive account of desires, according to which desires are explainable in terms of a combination of presentations, feelings, and judgments. He considers that desires are intentional. It is they aim at something X. And he writes, what we desire is the aim of a desire. End of quotation. The object, so X, is present in our presentation, and thus desires are composed of presentations. Next, according to Twardowski, desires contain feelings. To describe something is to present the object as pleasant or unpleasant. Twardowski notices here an important nuance. The quality of feelings in desires is dependent on whether the desires X existence as being pleasant or desires X non-existence as being unpleasant. So I want to make something to be, or I want to prevent something not to be. He considers the examples of one's hope and expectations for a relaxing summer trip. Before the trip, there is an element of desire. I want to go somewhere. And in addition, one experiences hope, which is considered by him as a feeling. for a trip, so a hope for a trip that meets one's expectations. But on the day of the trip, there is no desire anymore, yet hope, so a feeling, can still be experienced. This shift is based on the status of the object of X. Before the trip, X is desire to be, whereas on the day of the trip, X is already accomplished. Hence, the cessation of desire. There is no desire anymore, only feelings remain, for Twardowski. Nevertheless, to state whether X exists or not, one needs to explain desires in terms of judgments. By and large, Twardowski identifies the following components of desires, and I quote Twardowski in this regard. So, 1, the presentation of an object, which is the object of hope. 2, a supposition that the object is real, now, in the past, in the future. 3, a belief that in the case of the object's existence, there will be a feeling of pleasure or a feeling of distress. And 4, a pleasant feeling based on 1, 2, and 3. End of quotation. In the light of this fragment, one may conclude that for Twardowski, desires are compositions of different phenomena, and as such, they can be explained, or rather described, in a reductive way. Therefore, desires do not form a separate class of mental phenomena. Okay, let's go to the question of the will. For Twardowski, the will is different from feelings. He holds that volitions cannot be explained as a mere combination of the other three classes of mental phenomena. Indeed, Twardowski lists the will as the fourth class of mental phenomena. To justify this thesis, he refers to the evidence of inner perception, which reveals a unique phenomenology of the will. It is a unique mode of experiencing its object, namely here, so in the will, within this experience, one decides if something X is to be real or not in the future due to one's own actions. Twardowski considers the example of deciding whether one should or not ask for a loan. To make this decision, one considers two possible future states. Either one does not ask for a loan, although this can be disastrous for one's finances, or one decides to request the loan and risk humiliation. But, and here comes the act of volition, and I quote fragment of Twardowski's lecture, "Finally, I decide to ask. Thank God I decided," end of quotation. So this is a relief. Thus, the will appears in the resolution I made. This example shows that volitions cannot be reduced to presentations. My act exceeds the apprehending of X as I want X to be or not to be, nor to judgments. My judgment about the future state, asking for a loan or not asking for a loan, cannot be true or false. It cannot be explained in terms of feelings either, even though feelings can accompany my volitions. I can experience an unpleasant feeling concerning my possible consequences of a pleasant feeling if a resolution is made. So feelings are there, but they are different from the will. Twardowski is aware that the unique mode of experiencing volitions is hard to notice, since often one's will is accompanied with feelings. However, if the component of feelings is dismissed, one is in position to account for the will as such. Let me consider the example discussed by Twardowski. I want to go somewhere, but I do not want to decide which route should be taken. I don't want to decide. I just want to go there. I do not present to myself alternative routes in the mode of being good or bad. To put it differently, I attempt to exclude the component of feelings from my experience. So this is all about in this example. To do this, as Twardowski continues to say, I do not consider which route is better, and later, while buying a ticket, I do not indicate a concrete route to my destination. I just want to be there. I decided that X, but X does not evoke any feelings in me. Precisely here lies the phenomenal quality of volitions. I decide that something, X, is to be real or not in the future due to my own actions. On the whole, Twardowski understands the will as a mental phenomenon that, just like feelings, is sui generis. It is intentionally directed toward an object apprehended in the mode of the resolution to be made, wherein the resolution makes the decision whether the object should or not exist due to one's action. So I'm going to conclusion. This paper explored only a part of the intersection of Brentano's theory of mind and the Lvov-Warsaw School in regard to the problem of how feelings relate to the will. So this was my main problem. And my point of departure was Brentano's infamous unity thesis, which persists that both feelings and the will have to be included within the unitary class of love and hate phenomena. As a result, Brentano opted for a three-class taxonomy of mental phenomena, where love and hate phenomena are listed besides presentations and judgments, and that's it, only three classes. Twardowski questioned Brentano's arguments in favor of the unitary class of love and hate phenomena, and he admitted the will and feelings as fundamental, different classes of mental phenomena. This line of reasoning brings into question and ultimately rejects Albertazzi's claim that Twardowski, like Brentano, held a three-class taxonomy of mental phenomena. As has been demonstrated in my talk, I hope, Twardowski preferred a four-class taxonomy that includes presentations, judgments, feelings, and the will. Of course, to elaborate this thesis in detail, one may wish to situate Twardowski's theory within the school of Brentano in the context of the classificatory program, and analyze Ehrenfeld's arguments in favor of differentiating feelings from the will. For sure, this slide is promising in drawing more nuanced picture of Twardowski. However, it would exceed the limits of the present talk. In any case, with these clarifications in mind, it is evident that Albertazzi is mistaken, given that for Twardowski feelings are different from desires, and desires are reducible to presentations, feelings, and judgments. However, the will cannot be reduced to desires. and as such, the class of evolutions is sui generis. There is separate class. Drawing these nuanced differences, it is easier to approach the Brentanian theory of mind and to understand how it resonated and developed later. Twardowski's position became unquestionably popular among the members of the Lvov-Warsaw School. For instance, Władysław Witwicki, Salomon Igel, and Leopold Blaustein, they all agreed with Twardowski that there are 4 classes of mental phenomena. So Witwicki, about whom we heard a few papers during this conference in his psychology textbook, at the very beginning when he reconstructs the basics of descriptive psychology, he simply treats this thesis so obvious that it does not require any additional argument. So there are 4 classes of mental phenomena, and that's it, right? Although the Lvov-Warsaw School was widely influenced by Brentano, Twardowski's 4-class taxonomy is significantly different from Brentano's tripartite classification. With this being said, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And let me open the discussion. Please first.
Thanks. So thanks for that talk. I want to better understand how. Let's just suppose this is you've given good argumentation for it, right? How do you unify the 4-part taxonomy, particularly right in light of problems like akrasia? Right?
Akrasia, right?
Right, because
yeah, but the existence of this phenomena does not question that the will is different class. So for Brentano, it's more tricky because Brentano would say that all classes are always present in every mental phenomena, but to different degree. But for Twardowski, it's different because you can have a mental phenomena which incorporates feelings, but not the will, and vice versa, right? So akrasia is kind of phenomena where you can have, you can have an action without the phenomenon of the will, right?
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a problem, right? I think that that's
right.
exactly right. You'd be acting irrationally, right? Why wouldn't it be? So I'll end it with
Right.
this, right? But I was just kind of like, how does Twardowski explain that acting acratically, given the 4-part distinction, right, is to act rationally?
I didn't consider this question from this angle, to be honest. So I even wasn't clear about this, category of rational action in this regard, because even this example when you want to go somewhere and a guy who wants to sell you a ticket asks you which route do you, I refuse. It's very artificial, right? It's very artificial. So it's a kind of introspective experiment to distill, to single out this kind of phenomena. But to be honest, I do not remember whether the question of akrasia is discussed. So as I said, a kind of a state with no feelings is considered, right? But akrasia, I do not remember. So he only considers this that I want to distill, because for him the problem is that I cannot notice the phenomenon of the will because there are so many feelings which make this experience very vague. So I have to, reduce those feelings and the will be over there. So that's the problem, not the reverse. So there is no the will, but there are still feelings. I'm not sure. I remember something like, but I'm not certain right now of this fragment, but Twardowski said that some examples of Brentano are really But this was rather an argument taken from explicitly from Ehrenfels, that those examples are not rooted in everyday life. We do not, experience the world surrounds us in the way they try to explain those relations. And akrasia, I do not remember, maybe in different parts, because this, even so, the published part is around 200 pages, so it's not much, but the whole volume of psychology is huge, right? It's more than 600 pages, and there are so many nuanced elements, and I will keep in mind your question. Maybe I will struggle with this question in the future. Thank you. I will note this. Akrasia.
Thank you. Can Twardowski explain the following combination of beliefs and desires? I very, very strongly desire to win the jackpot in Euro Millions. I believe strongly that if I do so, I will experience extreme pleasure or satisfaction. I also extremely strongly believe that I will never win the jackpot at Euro Millions, even if I play it every week, because the chances of winning are over 1 in 138 million. Is that something he can be happy with, or does he have to change at least the middle theory?
So it's very sophisticated state, right? He was rather, so those courses were held for students much before the psychology department was established in Lvov. So he wanted only to, give some hints, some preliminary ideas, and he, as far as I remember, he didn't consider much complex, very complex examples in this regard. But my guess would be, but it's my side. So he was more liberal than Brentano in a regard to describe different experiences, because with Brentano, when he presented this general idea of descriptive psychology, so this theoretical background, somehow this determined also the other decisions, also the root of explanation. So we can say today that many examples given by Brentano are designed precisely in this framework. And if you are, if you want to do philosophy or descriptive psychology, or what I called, following today's readings, emotional phenomenology, it should be bottom up, right, phenomenology. So rather you had to collect different phenomena, as you said, and later you should say what is over there. And I think that Twardowski was open for this route, because he didn't make this presupposition at the very beginning that this is not only that there are 3 classes, and not only this, but the more even crucial thesis is that all classes are always present in every mental phenomena. Even if you are thinking about abstract theory, there is a feeling, because you somehow like this and you desire to solve the problem of the. So everywhere, maybe it's very minimal, maybe it's huge, I know, but everywhere there is this component. So in Twardowski, there is different attitude with which I personally sympathize, that he rather tried to extract some examples, and he later considers what to do with those examples.
Sorry, I mean, I absolutely agree that Twardowski is right against Brentano. I mean, Brentano's argument could be used to show that black is white.
Yeah.
Because you've got a continuum of intervening shades of grey. And that's very silly. But I was just wondering whether his theory, as he presented it, which is interesting. I mean, it's by no means obviously wrong, can cope with the wide range of phenomena that you get by analysing or by looking at different cases. I mean, I very much admire his methodology, and I'm sure his, certainly against Brentano, he is on the side of the angels. But if you're putting forward a theory, you don't want counterexamples.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
I would like only to point that the three courses of emotion by Twardowski have been available online since 2005, and even the first one course was translated in French and transcribed.
Indeed.
In the project.
I would say that unfortunately they were accessible online because at the beginning I struggled with this handwritten manuscript, and later, due to huge work here at the University of Warsaw, right now they are available in a more, pleasant, by the way. Thank you for this.
Okay, thank you once again. And now another paper will be presented by Aleksandra Bomuczak, but I have to ask you something during the in this break, because it's fantastic that Twardowski made this theoretical argumentation for the distinction between acts of will and emotions. But what's the practical value of this distinction? What does it mean? Does it change anything in, for instance, how education or anything like that? Because, for instance, the sphere of emotions is very important for ethics, yes, in Twardowski's. Acts of will are very important for consistent activity, rationality, And so if they are essentially different, what does it mean for our practical life? Is it a question for Twardowski?
I didn't consider this. I didn't consider, and I didn't read this from this angle. I have to think about it. Yeah, but you're right that the consequences are huge, right?
Okay.
Yeah, they are huge. So, of course, for instance, for Witwicki, if a feeling is different from the will, so you can do a theory of a specific feeling which is not connected with the will, and you can draw differences over the, for instance, in his theory of pratism. But this is ad vocem answer, but I have to consider this. I wasn't interested in this. I was rather interested in this historical background, so the history of Brentano, Ehrenfels, and the others. Sturm. Yeah.
All the time sometimes we argue about what it's for.
Yeah.
For instance, there are 3 or 4 basic mental states.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, and the way
Yeah.
they argue for it is interesting.
You can also you can also say
It's like phenomena, or it's a different way to describe consciousness.
Yes, of
It's
course.
not for a kind of act.
Of course.
The judgment is act. The Vorstellen is act. But really, it's really act. It's more complicated. And
But is it not true that in every mental phenomenon he distinguished the same structure as in judgment?
In Twardowski, you have ammonia, like a picture of it. So you have to keep up to date with my publication.
I will for sure.
No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now we are moving to Alexandra's paper, Phenomenology in the Lvov-Warsaw School inquires into the analytic continental divide in contemporary philosophy. Alexandra represents Adam Mickiewicz University, but also University of Warsaw because she's involved in our projects.
Yeah, so thank you for this introduction. So I will present an overview of the research I've done for the last several years. So this will be only a sketch of, like, I want to just present the basic elements of this research. So I will start with the idea that led me here to do this. So of course, we all know that the Lvov-Warsaw School has long been considered as part of the analytic tradition, and this is nothing controversial since the contribution of the Lvov-Warsaw School to the development of formal logic and philosophy of language, etc., is probably its biggest achievements. However, such a qualification in some sense may distort the picture of the Lvov-Warsaw School, which is quite actually, like, the philosophy of the Lvov-Warsaw School is quite rich. So I started to think about some other aspects of the school. We all know, for example, that through Brentano, the Lvov-Warsaw School shared the same roots as the phenomenological movement. And several of Twardowski's students went to Göttingen and later to Freiburg, and came into contact with Husserl. Another thing is that Ingarden was in the environment of the Lvov-Warsaw School, and he may have influenced the younger generation of Twardowski's students. So I became interested in the following questions. So first, was the connection with Husserl reflected in their philosophizing? What kind of reception, if any, has phenomenology in the Lvov-Warsaw School? For example, how did they assess phenomenology? And on the other side, let's say, if and how did phenomenologists, mainly Ingarden, view the Lvov-Warsaw School? And the research is restricted mainly to the pre-1939, to the period before the Second World War, when the Lvov-Warsaw School was still a coherent environment. However, there is also a broader context for the research, and that is the analytic continental divide. And in research decades, we can observe the growing interest in the problems that surround this concept of the division of 20th century philosophy. We have a lot of differing standpoints, whether it is significant or not, whether this is justified or not, etc., etc. And there are various studies devoted, for example, to historical revisions, when philosophers show that this relationships between those various philosophical movements was quite complex. I've noticed that the Lvov-Warsaw School is basically absent from those studies. The scholars don't generally take under consideration the Lvov-Warsaw School. When the Lvov-Warsaw School appears in this context, it is often just one sentence that it was an analytic school that was developed in Poland, and this is the end. So there was some sort of global aim here, that is to include the Lvov-Warsaw School into this discussion. And I argue that the position of the Lvov-Warsaw School is unique against the background of other analytic circles or schools or centers, however we call it, which may be beneficial for what is called the bridge building exercise. That is, this is also a big trend in the analytic continental divide studies. That is the idea that we can build bridges between those two traditions because there are considered oppositions, and we have to surpass it for various reasons. So this is a general plan. First, I will talk very sketchily about the main things about the divide or the emergence of the divide, which are important in the context of the Lvov-Warsaw School. Then I will present the very basic ideas of Twardowski's program because they were important for the reception of phenomenology. And then I will move to present this Lvov-Warsaw School standpoint on phenomenology. So how did they view it and assess it? And next, I will just present very an overview of the presence of Husserlian motives, what I call the Husserlian motives in the philosophy of the Lvov-Warsaw School, and also briefly present Roman Ingarden's standpoint on the Lvov-Warsaw School. So everything will be like very, very sketchy because I wanted to just present the whole picture. So when you think about the analytic continental divide, like scholars present various reasons for the emergence. There are philosophical reasons that are pointed out, but there are also historical, political, or sociological reasons for the emergence of the divide or the narrative about the divide. This is the whole separate issue. I will not talk about that. When we think about those philosophical reasons, there were various controversies between philosophers at that time, which I think were significant for the development of this perception of the division between those two traditions, let's say. But I think very often Husserl and Frege is quoted as a start of the divide or something like that, but this was actually not, I think, so important for the divide. More important are other controversies between Russell and Bergson, Schlick and Husserl, Ryle versus Brentano, Husserl and Heidegger, and finally Carnap versus Heidegger, because there were the same motives that were emerging in all of those criticisms of phenomenology by analytic philosophers. And the main target of the criticism is very often this idea that intuition is a reliable source of knowledge, and it is present in all of those works. And with Carnap, of course, his criticism is targeted against metaphysical statements, which he deems meaninglessness. However, he also, in the end of his paper, says that every statement that is like based on what philosophers say, like knowledge by intuition, is also meaningless. So he mentions also this idea here. And generally, they also share various views about phenomenology. First, Schlick and Ryle say that if phenomenologists get anything right, it is by analysis of concepts and not by intuition. Ryle actually proposes to reduce phenomenology to philosophy of psychology, which he defines as the analysis of psychological concepts, or the analysis of statements that include psychological concepts, sorry. And finally, Carnap actually proposes to reduce all philosophy to the analysis of concepts by eliminating meaningless concepts and elucidating concepts to be used in science. And we will see that the members of the Lvov-Warsaw School actually have, to some extent, similar problems with phenomenology. Okay, so as to Twardowski, there are several essential elements of his philosophical program that were significant positively and maybe even for some people negatively for the reception of phenomenology, and that was the idea of philosophical minimalism, emphasis on clarity, criticism and anti-dogmatism, and openness. That is, he didn't expect his students to follow his views, and they could deal with any philosophical problem they wanted to. And another parts that are important here are the presence, big presence of descriptive psychology, and the methods that was associated with it, and that is analytic description, which also can be defined in terms of the analysis of concepts. So the Lvov-Warsaw School members wrote several papers or several works that deal with phenomenology. However, they are mainly of introductory nature. They talk about phenomenology in mainly in the papers that try to overview what was happening in philosophy at the time. The exception here is Blaustein, who devoted like several studies to phenomenology itself. But from those various works, we can generally develop a coherent picture of what phenomenology is from the perspective of the Lvov-Warsaw School. And this is a very basic interpretation, but still we have something like that in the Lvov-Warsaw School. So first, they say that phenomenology is a science of essence, which aims to distinguish between and describe the essences. And they also call this distinguishment and this description the method of distinction. And they often consider essence as some sort of ideal entity. The exception was Tatarkiewicz and also Blaustein, because he identified essence with general objects. They consider intuition of essence as a main method, and they use the term Wessenschau. It was used by Blaustein, by Ajdukiewicz, and by Bohensky. So the intuition is, of course, direct and immanent, so it does not rely on inference or reasoning. So this is what they say. And they also identify the reduction as the core of the broad phenomenological method. And of course, in the end, the intuition of essence, according to Blaustein, becomes the intuition of phenomena of pure consciousness, which led Husserl to idealism, which was noticed but also by other members of the Lvov-Warsaw School. So they appreciated the method of distinctions, and it feels that they do that because it is similar to the analysis of concepts that was practiced by the Lvov-Warsaw School, because Twardowski emphasized this idea of having very well-defined concepts, and it was very, like Professor Brożek, for example, says in her work, like fundamental thing for the Lvov-Warsaw School. And the similarity between the method used by Twardowski and his students and the method of distinction was also noticed by Roman Ingarden. So in this sense, we can see that they appreciate in phenomenology practically the same thing as other analytic philosophers, although analytic like Schlick and Ryle were much more critical, even when they said that because they said that, well, this is the only good thing phenomenologists did. And Lvov-Warsaw School was not so radical. And however, they generally, the Lvov-Warsaw School was critical toward Husserl's project. They did not accept phenomenological methods as the method they could practice. And they went against the intuition of essence as a reliable philosophical method, and against the essence even as the object of phenomenological inquiry or philosophical inquiry, against reduction since it leads to idealism. And they also, quite often we can see that they accuse Husserl and Ingarden and Heidegger, because some of them, especially Ajdukiewicz, writes about Heidegger. They accuse them of obscure writing. So in this sense, they also criticize similar thing as other analytic philosophers, and that this idea of intuition as a source of knowledge. However, their approach is less radical, because they actually, some of them allow intuitive cognition in ethics, for example, Czerzowski. By contrast, Schlick argues that intuition has nothing to do with knowledge, and Carnap proposes eliminating all science of value from philosophy. And of course, this is what I think we all know, that that a lot of Twardowski students work in descriptive psychology, whereas, for example, Ryle proposes to reduce descriptive psychology and phenomenology to the analysis of propositions, which include psychological concepts. So in this sense, the Lvov-Warsaw School were, even though they were critical, they're more positive than other analytic philosophers. And which is fundamental, despite this criticism of Husserl's project and phenomenology in general, What I found really interesting is that this criticism and the rejection actually of this project did not prevent them from taking inspiration from Husserl's philosophy. And this was already noticed by Leopold Blaustein, who says that Polish philosophers appreciate the value of numerous Husserl's theories. However, they go against the form in which they are presented, since it lacks sufficient clarity and scientifically satisfying strictness. So here are the works where we can find reference to Husserl. Some of them are more significant, some of them are less significant, and the influence may be classified as sometimes we find adaptation, in the sense that they just, like Bandrowski and Błachowski, for example, they just accept Husserl's concept of, or Husserl's theory and description of the idea of understanding expressions, and they adapt it to their theories. Mostly they are critical, like Ajdukiewicz and Blaustein and Ginsberg-Blaustein. However, this criticism leads them to developing their own concepts, their own theories. So in this sense, the influence is also positive. So we can see that there are various works here that, and various philosophical disciplines in which they applied or discussed Husserl's ideas. And in this sense, their approach to Husserl is unique against the background of other analytic circles, where the reception of Husserl and phenomenology, like, given the current state of art, was quite narrow. We don't have in British philosophy of the time, or in Austrian philosophy and the Vienna Circle, not British philosophy as a whole, but British analytic philosophy, this kind of reception of Husserl's philosophy. There were some examples, but they are controversial. For example, in Carnap, there is a controversy between, for example, Guillermo Rosado Haddock and Christian Dambeck, whether Husserl actually influenced Carnap or not, to what extent this influence in the Logische Aufbau was significant or not. This is the same with Ryle. There is a controversy between Brandl and Amy Thomason about the extent of Husserl's and Heidegger's influence of some of his ideas in the concept of mind. But in the Lvov-Warsaw School, we generally can positively say that there was this sort of positive reception of Husserl ideas, and of course they were very early. So the earliest one was Łukasiewicz in 1904, and that was Husserl's arguments against psychologism, which was, according to Jan Woleński, fundamental for the Lvov-Warsaw School. And I didn't want this work to be one-sided, so I decided also to research Ingarden's standpoint on the Lvov-Warsaw School, because this was also a unique situation on the background of other analytic circles. The presence of Ingarden was quite significant, and Ingarden was actually a first critic of Twardowski's philosophical program, but it must be read in comparisons to what he writes about Husserl's teaching, because he uses what Husserl was doing in order to criticize Twardowski. So he goes against this idea of philosophical minimalism, against the postulate of clarity, and against even the freedom Twardowski gave to his students, because he accused Twardowski that he wasn't a leader that could direct his students to create some sort of comprehensive, systemic philosophical theory. And of course, he also criticized logical positivism, and he identified the Warsaw branch with logical positivism. And he even went against classification of the Lvov-Warsaw School as analytic philosophy. There were various controversies, especially with Kotarbiński, when they showed like this completely opposing sides on those on the issue which are mentioned here. However, with Ingarden, we can also talk about the possible influence on the Lwów-Warsaw School, but this is a topic that needs further investigation. We already have like this big monograph edited by Professor Brożek and Professor Jadacki. There is this idea about the Lwów-Warsaw School of Lwów Circle of Phenomenologists, which would include Auerbach, Blaustein, Ginsberg, Igel, and Witwicki. Witwicki Tadeusz, the son of Władysław. However, this is the part like this idea of the Lwów Circle of Phenomenology. I didn't include that part because I was mostly focused on Husserl, and these philosophers actually refer in a broader way to other phenomenologists like Geiger, Pender, Reinach, and Ingarden. So this is something I would like to do in the future. So to conclude, there is this sense of division in the Lwów-Warsaw School in the sense, like in this, that they were generally critical towards phenomenology. So one could think about it as some sort of confirmation that we have some sort of the divide in Polish philosophy. However, the Lwów-Warsaw School members' criticism of phenomenology did not prevent them from engaging with Husserl's and also with Ingarden's and other phenomenologists' work, even though they did not accept the project. I already said that, but they still appreciated the ideas, which is significant from this perspective of the history of the divide and this idea of bridge building exercise. What is important about this reception is also that they mainly refer to logical investigations. However, those younger people like Auerbach and Blaustein refer also to other works. I think it also shows an interesting thing, that is the way they use Husserl's work shows how rich his philosophy is, in the sense that this is not only a phenomenology, like you can use various concepts just like for your own philosophizing. And we can also see in some of these works that they analyze Husserl outside phenomenology. For example, Eugenia Ginsberg-Blaustein doesn't even use the word in her studies. So in this senses, also with Ingarden's present and the relationship, the Lwów-Warsaw School is unique against the background of other analytic philosophers. This is like I think, a unique feature of the Lwów-Warsaw School, if we think about it as an analytic school. So finally, this problem still has a lot of areas that are to be discovered, to be researched. And the one thing, so the first thing I would like to engage maybe somewhere in the future, is this Lwów-Warsaw School of Phenomenologists. That is, for example, we need to answer the question whether something unifies this group's engagement with phenomenology. So whether we can say that there is something in their approach that allows us to say that there was they formed some sort of coherent group. So with that, I would like to finish with a quote from Smith, Mulligan, and Simons from their paper on the condition of philosophy. The honest pioneering spirit of the early and constructive phase of analytic philosophy has its close parallels also in the early phenomenologists, so much so that a century ago there existed no gulf between them, and this is precisely the spirit that must be rekindled. And I think that Lwów-Warsaw School also fits into this pioneering spirit picture, because this is exactly what they did. So they looked above, for example, above the critical standpoint on phenomenology, and found in phenomenologists' works things which are worth considering. So with this, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alexandra. It was excellent.
I have the last word there. I'm going to have the first word. Thank you. It was wonderful. I don't disagree with anything. I just want to add a couple of, I hope, useful points. Firstly, as a matter of fact, no one takes Ryle seriously in England anymore. We can forget him. He was a a blip in the history of 20th century Anglo-Saxon philosophy. Secondly, there are phenomenologists that, for various reasons, are very close to analytic philosophy but don't get mentioned a lot, specifically Reinach and Dalbert. Reinach was killed, Dalbert became a farmer. So there are lots of interesting counterfactuals along there. Thirdly, I think perhaps one ought to say that the notion of a school means something very different in the context of German philosophy than it does when we talk about the Lvov-Warsaw School. The Lvov-Warsaw School wasn't actually a school in the German sense, because although Twardowski taught people how to do philosophy rigorously, he didn't expect them all to agree with everything he said. In fact, he rather encouraged them to be independent-minded. Whereas if you look at the attitude of Brentano in particular, but also Husserl towards their own students who deviated from their views, they were very fiercely opposed and angry about this. So Brentano, for instance, was very rude about Husserl and said, thank goodness I've got rid of him to go and do his habilitation with Stumpf. And he also hated, literally hated Meinong's views. And Meinong is somebody who's an interesting sort of halfway house between analytic and phenomenological ways of doing things. So in German terms, in terms of this fiercely genealogical, you've got to follow the master guru type thing, the Lvov-Warsaw School has an honored originator, but it doesn't have a guru in the same sense that Brentano, Husserl, Marti, and so on aspired to be gurus.
Yes, thank you. Can I quickly answer? So as to the first comment, I think that this is really disappointing when in those studies about the divide in philosophy, that they generally take, for example, Husserl or Heidegger or Derrida and show like those divergences with analytic philosophy, but they never, like I haven't found like significant or many, I don't know, now I don't remember. I think in Spiegelberg you have something like that about Pfander, but they don't take under considerations, for example, phenomenologies from the Göttingen circle. So, for example, Reinach is not considered in this context. And also Pfander, who also could be considered as closer to the analytic idea of philosophizing. So this is something that, like in analytic continental divide studies, there, like scholars make like these big statements about this opposition, etc. But they don't go very deep into those traditions, or into like they focus on those like the main figures, let's say, or something like that. And as to the second thing, like this is actually what Ingarden accused Twardowski of doing, that he wasn't this kind of a leader, etc. So yes, in this sense, the notion of the school in the context of the Lvov-Warsaw School is something very specific. Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, I just had two things. One, and I'm just going to be, I'm totally honest, I really like the paper, it's outstanding and everything. So I was thinking, you should check into Mind Volume 100, like issue 4. It's from 1976. And they got all the old editors back who are still alive, and then some editors who wanted to talk about what the other editors had done since its founding. And I believe there's one in there by Ryle, wherein he was disavowing any prejudice he may have had towards someone who wasn't an analytic philosopher. And to be quite honest with you, he failed miserably. He seemed to actually indict himself rather than take away what we thought was. So it's just a helpful hand, so to speak. The other thing I thought of too is that there's an interesting passage in Husserl's Idea of Phenomenology from 1907. That's like a 7-lecture series, and I can't remember which lecture it is, so I apologize for that. But he talks about going around a table, and he describes this kind of appearings in certain ways to his perception, right? And if you look at Problems of Philosophy by Russell, it's almost word for word the same thing, right? And I know that there have been some people who have actually done some work on this, thinking that Husserl and Russell had some kind of.
Yes, there is some work. on
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. So I'm just, here you go. That's
No,
all.
no,
So
I didn't know about this one,
Right,
with
right.
Problems of Philosophy, but I remember that Nikolai Milkov, although he is at like very things in terms of those divisions, but in his book he writes there is a chapter on Husserl and Russell, so that there are studies like that also. But I didn't know about the Problems of Philosophy and the idea of.
It's almost verbatim. It's really, it's kind of a wild thing to read.
Okay.
Back, and just as a matter of further.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask whether there was some discussion of Heidegger, because
Yes.
we discussed previously that in Husserl it's easy to find some common ground between analytic and content philosophy. But it seems to me that to Heidegger it's much more difficult to find something that could be inspiring for analytic philosophers. And as already everybody knows, that he was kind of people. Nichted and examples like that was discussed widely, even in Lvov-Warsaw School. That's something which is wrong.
Ajdukiewicz, in his paper on philosophy in Poland from 1937, or not philosophy in Poland, but directions and currents in contemporary philosophy, or something like that. This is a paper in Polish from the 1937. He discusses Heidegger. He calls it life philosophy there. And generally, he criticizes Heidegger for his obscurity, that it resembles more of a poetry than philosophy, and that he says that it may evoke some feelings, but it is not based on argumentation or anything. So he generally rejects it, and he also says that he juxtaposes Heidegger and also Scheler, which because he includes both of them as life philosophers, to logical philosophy, which he considers himself as a representative. You know, he also mentions Vienna Circle representatives here. So he has actually this. There is this idea of a division here, because he presents life philosophy and logical philosophy as nurt logistyczny, he uses the term, as an opposition. And another representative of the Lvov-Warsaw School who wrote about Heidegger a little bit was Bocheński. And Bocheński was actually much more positive towards Heidegger. However, he didn't write like a paper about Heidegger, I think. Like devoted to Heidegger. He mentions that, for example, in Logika I Wiara, in this interview with Jan Paris, he talks about Heidegger, that he was impressed, for example, by Heidegger's analysis of time, but he considered forgot the title in English, Bycie I czas, being and time, sorry, as extremely difficult. And he said that this project was deemed to fall because Heidegger tried to derive ontology from the subject, and it is impossible. So I know these two mentions about Heidegger in the Lvov-Warsaw School.
Thank you.
Okay, two more questions, Peter.
I spoke to Bocheński about this. I have spoken to Bocheński about this, and I was very surprised to find his positive views on Heidegger, but actually I rather share them in the following sense. Oh God, will I ever be a let back here? Heidegger, I mean, sure, Heidegger was obscure, his use of language was stomach churning, but he started out initially anyway with a very ambitious project, which is not stupid, which was the project to rethink the world, and particularly human life, in terms of a set of categories which are not Aristotelian. Because the Aristotelian categories give rise to the mind-body problem and the mind-world problem. And these are really pseudo-problems. Ryle was right about that. Gosh, did Ryle ever go to Freiburg? Of course he did. He knew
Yes.
Heidegger. He didn't like him. He described him as a shit from the heels upwards. But that was probably after he knew that Heidegger was a Nazi. But Heidegger had a go, a very radical go, at completely rethinking the categories in which we understand human experience. There are reasons why it went wrong, and I think Polanski was right, that it was bound to fail, but it was a try. And the sad things were two. Firstly, Heidegger went seriously insane later. And secondly, he had annoyed so many people that people didn't want to have to do anything with anything that resembled it. But I mean, I consider Heidegger to have been the primary cause of the split between analytic and phenomenological or continental philosophy. Because if you look at what was, I've said this many times, if you look at what was going on up until 1914, you couldn't put a paper between what, say, Russell was doing, what Meinung was doing. Frege and Husserl were quite happy to exchange letters about logic and psychology and so on. They didn't agree, but you know, get two philosophers in a room and you get three disagreements. So, you know, I think Heidegger was the bad guy in this.
And the last question.
Po polsku to zrobię, bo będzie szybciej. And I hope by the dinner and wine I try to translate English. Chciałabym, myślę, że w całej tej sprawie jest bardzo też ważny aspekt instytucjonalny, po prostu. Zajęć, stanowisk katedr uniwersyteckich i tu się bardzo odgrywała sprawa podziałów. Już ze 20 lat temu przetłumaczyłam na polski korespondencję Husserla i Twardowskiego w sprawie no, kariery uniwersyteckiej Ingardena. Bardzo ciekawe, jak oni między sobą rozmawiali, ale tu chciałam tylko ze względu na pani bardzo interesujący odczyt powiedzieć, że tam Twardowski pisze do Husserla: Sie haben ja eine ganz spezielle philosophische Richtung, ganz spezielle philosophische Richtung. I jak on to podawał jako argument, dlaczego tak trudno znaleźć profesurę dla Ingardena, to dlatego właśnie, że fenomenologia Husserla, jeszcze nie jesteśmy przy Heideggerze, wyrywała się z pewnego najszerszego kanonu filozofii akademickiej. I rzeczywiście, ja 25 lat spędziłam w archiwum Husserla i mogę powiedzieć, że jest zasadą, powinna być raczej doświadczenie fenomenologiczne, opisywane, a nie interpretacja tekstów. To pierwsza rzecz. A druga rzecz to w 2007 roku, zresztą pan Płotka był obecny, to o czym się dowiedziałam dopiero niedawno, w Centrum Panów w Paryżu organizowałam tygodniowy zlot Husserl Circle, czyli naprawdę zaangażowanych husserlianistów z całego świata, przede wszystkim Amerykanów. I na tej konferencji przedstawiłam sama odczyt pod tytułem Leopolian Analytical Phenomenology. I przedstawiałam oczywiście Blausteina, Auerbacha. I to, co było bardzo ciekawe, moim zdaniem to w ogóle pierwszy raz we Francji użyto słowa fenomenologia analityczna. To przeszło bez problemu i amerykańscy husserlianiści jak najbardziej zaakceptowali analityczność, polską analityczność fenomenologii, która była uprawiana przez Blausteina i innych. To trochę relatywizuje dyskusje i podziały, ale wydaje mi się, że pokazuje coś specyficznego od stosunku jednego do drugiego.
Dziękuję bardzo.
No to chyba nie, to pani ma.
Mogę tutaj zabrać. Tak, będę stać. Dziękuję. Tak. No z tą analityczną fenomenologią to w ogóle teraz już ten termin funkcjonuje. Pojawia się chyba Sievert, myślę, jest nazwisko, w tym dyskursie o fenomenologii. Także jak najbardziej. No i Bocheński właśnie też w tym artykule, no, po polsku, już powiem po polsku, o filozofii analitycznej mówi, że fenomenolodzy też kładą nacisk na analizę, tylko ten problem z intuicją jest według Bocheńskiego, bo jakby Znaczy on tak w tym artykule pisze, że opierają się na intuicji, a nie na rozumowaniu i to jest nie do zaakceptowania dla analitycznych filozofów. No ale tak na marginesie. Dziękuję bardzo. So, thank you very much.
Okay, and now we are moving to the last part of our session. That's the presentation of research project titled Encyclopedia of the Lwów-Warsaw School. And I will present it together with Alexandra and Robert Krymski, who came from Lublin. I and Alexandra represent those who realized this project, investigators, and Robert Krymski represents the publisher of Encyclopedia, which will really soon be published. We hoped that we could show you today a paper version of Encyclopedia. Unfortunately, we still need a few more weeks to succeed with it. But it's really, we can see it now, the end of it, and we hope that you will also be able to imagine what it would look like. And we also would like to show you the first sketch of electronic version of the encyclopedia, because our idea is that the encyclopedia of the Lwów-Warsaw School should be available to anybody, anywhere in the world. That's why this electronic version, internet version of encyclopedia is something most important for us. So I will start from very short presentation of the project and the idea of it and what we plan to do in this last weeks and months of the realization of this project, and then we will move to we will move to Alexandra's presentation of this electronic version. Okay. Okay. I hope that also our online participants can now see the slides. Okay, so Encyclopedia of the Lwów-Warsaw School, short presentation of the project. Oh, sorry. What happened? Okay. Yeah, Encyklopedia Szkoły Lwowsko-Warszawskiej, that's the Polish title. Logika, ontologia, epistemologia, psychologia, etyka, estetyka. Is a project which is realized now for 7 years. And the head of the project is Professor Jacek Jadacki. Unfortunately, Jacek could not join us today, but he sends greetings to you all. And he was the head of the project and the one who from the very beginning, I know Jacek already for 20 years, wanted to do something like that, and he really made a great job in this project. And I'm the principal investigation in this project, and we also invited to it many young scholars who helped us to analyze the works of the members of the Lwów-Warsaw School. This is the list of this group: Krystian Bogucki, Mateusz Dzięcioł, Joanna Frydrych, Maciej Głowacki, Aleksandra Gomułczak, Zofia Hałęza, Jakub Jednak, Stanisław Jędrczak, Ignacy Kłaput, Łukasz Kołodziejczak, Artur Kosecki, Maciej Raźniak, Krzysztof Sękowski, Antoni Torzewski and Bartłomiej Uzer. But Alexandra is the most important person among this group, because last year Alexandra, let's say, joined us full time. Namely, she really made a great job during this last year of the realization of the project by editing our entries and encyclopedia entries, by correcting the bibliographies, and recently she is involved in making this electronic version, this internet version of encyclopedia. So without Alexandra, anything would be possible, and I'm really thankful to her. Both me and Jacek Jadacki, because she really made a great job. And what is our idea? Our idea is to provide anyone interested 130 years after the founding of the Lwów-Warsaw School, a set of essential information about the school's members and their work. Our intention is that this presentation would be possibly complete compendium, including all members of the school, with full biographical data and complete bibliographies and reconstruction of the most important results of the members. And we projected for it for broad audience, possibly broadest audience. That's why the encyclopedia will have Polish and English versions. And it also has an online edition. And this online edition is inspired by encyclopedias such as Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. We took many inspirations from the history of the Lwów-Warsaw School because dictionaries and encyclopedias were planned by many members of the school. Unfortunately, the majority of this project were not successful. For instance, Kazimierz Twardowski in the academic year 1913-1914, with his group of his seminar participants, worked on the philosophical dictionary. They prepared the letters A and B. He planned to publish a terminological dictionary of philosophy also in 1918, because Poland just regained independence, and for Twardowski it was really important that Poles have one philosophical dictionary from various partitions of Poland. It was something really essential for him, but unfortunately also he did not succeed with this project. Zawirski is another member of the school who, in fact, almost realized the project of philosophical dictionary. He worked on it during the last years of his life, also during the Second World War. And he worked on philosophical dictionary, which contained both subject and biographical entries. And it was supposed to be published after the war. Unfortunately, because of censorship, it could not be published because, for instance, he presented Lenin as a dictator, so it was a little bit impossible at that time. Another person from the Lwów-Warsaw School who wanted to produce, let's say, a philosophical dictionary was Czerzowski. In Tadeusz Czerzowski's archives, there is a typescript of philosophical dictionary covering entries from C to Z. So it's a kind of a complementation of Twardowski's dictionary, and it is preserved. So it is unfortunately not published, but you may look at some entries. They are quite interesting. Both persons, philosophers, and subjects entries are included into it. Also, Tatarkiewicz worked on philosophical dictionary. He worked on it with his students, particularly during his seminars during the war, the Second World War. And this dictionary was almost ready before the Warsaw Uprising. Unfortunately, it was burned during the war. And Kotarbiński also aspired to publish a dictionary or encyclopedia. The work on the dictionary who carried out in his circle is evidenced, for instance, by the fact that Janina Kotarbińska published an article, Analysis of the Concept of Chance, which had a subtitle, Contribution to the Philosophical Dictionary. And such contributions to philosophical dictionary, such an expression, occurs also in other papers from Kotarbiński's center. Now, what was our idea? The most important problem which we had with Jacek Jadacki was who should we count as a member of the school? Because, as you know, there are, among historians of the school, there are arguments how long did the school function, and so on. But usually it is assumed that Twardowski's students and students of his students are counted into the school, and we accepted this and made some exceptions, let's say. So the core of the group of individuals which we included into the encyclopedia is, of course, Kazimierz Twardowski, the founder of the school, and then we have so-called didactic generations. By students, in case of the first generation of the school, we mean those who obtained master degree or doctorates. Of course, master's degrees were introduced in the late 20s. Before that, only doctorates were made by Twardowski. So in the case of the second generation, there are those who obtained a master's degree or doctorates under the supervisions of Twardowski's students. So in my opinion, which is I think confirmed by also by other historians of this tradition, making doctorate or writing a master thesis was quite a strong connection because this didactics of philosophy was considered in the school very seriously. It was not the fact that someone could, I don't know, give a ready PhD dissertation to Twardowski and he just accepted it. It was not the case. Yes, this contact was close. It took some time. The work was really corrected by Twardowski, encouraged by him, and so on. That's why we thought that it is a good criterion. Yeah, this having a PhD or master degree under Twardowski is a good criterion of being a student. We also made some exceptions and included also some persons which do not fulfill this this condition, namely Stefan Błachowski, Władysław Tatarkiewicz, Czesław Znamierowski, Józef Bocheński, Jerzy Giedymin, Henryk Hisz, Zbigniew Jordan, Jerzy Pelc, Jan Salamucha, Jan Żednicki, and Helena Strzemecka. These persons have very strong spiritual connections to the Lwów-Warsaw School, despite they did not prepare PhDs or master degrees by members of the school. And now, yeah, I know that Alexandra knows the answer and also Robert knows the answer. What would you say? How many members of these two didactic generations there are? Please guess. Any guesses? Okay, so you cannot guess. Because as far as I remember, list of in Woleński's book includes like 80.
Less than 100, I think. But he says that it may be around 100.
So 100 or more. More, yeah. Our encyclopedia lists almost 300 entries. Okay, almost 300 entries. And this is a very shortly list of names included into the school. Letter A, letter B, statistically more represented, letter C, letter D, letter E and F, G, H and I, J, also represented, K, very much represented by Poles, L and O, M, N and O, P, R, S, H, T, V, W, and Z. Let's look here because we've got one member of the school present here in our conference. This is Professor Urszula Wybraniec-Skardowska, who is the representative of the second generation of the school. And she is also included into our encyclopedia. Okay. In the end of the project, so in a few weeks or months, we will have 5 paper volumes of encyclopedia that will be published in Academicon publishing house. And we will have 5 volumes. The first 2 volumes in Polish are biographies. Then the third is lexicon, okay, so with the list of most important concepts with translations into few languages. Then iconography, namely pictures of individual members of the school and group pictures. And we collected almost all 300 pictures of the Lwów-Warsaw School members. It was extremely difficult because some of these persons are really difficult to find. but we almost succeed. There are only 2 or 3 lacks in this. And the volume 5 will be published in English, and this will be biographies a little bit shortened with respect to the Polish version. So we will have 296 alphabetically arranged biographical entries. Each of entry has 4 parts: brief encyclopedic description of the person, biographical information, which is standardized. So we try to find the place of birth, place of death, dates of PhD, habilitation, and so on for every of these 300 persons. And I will only mention that in search for this biographical data, we obtained information from almost 200 private individuals and over 100 institutions. So really big work to do, but it's done. So we succeeded in it, and we also present such things as scholar achievements, more concisely captured by the title of the section "Ideas, Problems, and Results." And we also included into the encyclopedia full, complete bibliographies, of all these members. It's really something. And Alexandra will show in a moment how it looks on particular examples, on particular entries, because she did something exceptional. Namely, Alexandra added to all these papers which have electronic version, added direct links to these papers. So if you read an entry on Twardowski or Błachowski or, I don't know, Rasiowa, you may go directly to the paper that are available on internet. Okay, so.
Yep. This is still working. Okay. Yeah, so we have to connect to the encyclopedia. Tak, to ja mam zacząć, a potem pan Kryński powie?
Czy pani pamięta, jaki jest adres?
Może mamy.
Nie, to jest... Panie Robercie, jaki jest adres? Bo myśmy zapomniały. Dobrze.
Ah, yes. Okay, it's here. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. So, so it's an English version here?
Możecie uruchomić szerowanie?
Udostępnienie.
Rozumiem. Okay, it will just share the screen.
Okay. Ready? So, this is the English version. We still don't have a click to change versions here because it is this is an initial phase of the project. We don't have, we have around 70 entries here. So we still have more than 200 to add. But it's ready to present. So right now, more entries should be here. In the English version, I can see that we have only 2. I don't know how to. Czy można to przenieść? Okay, so here we have a part with prologue, where the project is described and the reasons behind the projects is described. And we also have part with all the shortcuts of names of institutions, names of publishing houses, names of cities, names of journals, because for the printed version, it was impossible, of course, in the bibliographies to include whole names of journals, etc., because it would be thousands of pages, probably. So everything is in shortcut. In the digital encyclopedia, we still think about the what solution to adapt here, whether we should add full names of the names of journals, for example, or just somehow link it to the name that is already present in the register. So I don't know. I can think maybe we can show it. We can show. Można pokazać rejestr. Okay. So this is a table of content for the register. So you can see that everything here, and we already I see that it is linked. So, for example, there are shortcuts of the names of journals, and it is like quite a long thing. So, and we still don't have clicks to return, I think. So this is how this part looks like. We will see how it will how the final version will look. Here are entries, but we still have a little bit underdeveloped this part, so we can't see everything. And what we will have here right now, we also have like those three areas: keywords, article types, and disciplines. So article types are right now we have biographical entries, but we think for the future to also have concepts. So the entries that are devoted to probably we will base it on the lexicon or something. We will see how it will turn out, because the project right now, like the project of encyclopedia is ending. However, we plan to develop it further in the following years. I can say that, I think. Yes. And we also have disciplines. So we try to in every entry. So let's see, those entries are not representative. So there will be also a search here, so you will be able to search for a name, for a concept, and anything you want. But in the Polish version, I think there is already a search, but search engine.
John put the Polish version.
But yeah, we have to switch because this one is very underdeveloped.
Yeah. The Polish version is much more developed, but just need the link.
Okay.
So sorry. That's one
Gdzie pan go wyśle?
Na maila. Już
Dobrze, albo
w tym momencie. Na pani maila.
Na mojego?
Nie, na pani elektronicznego. To mogę jeszcze.
O, ja tu nie jestem zalogowana.
While you're doing that, can I ask a question?
Okay.
With regard to bibliography, especially in the interwar period, there was a practice of publishing short summaries and abstracts of talks given by Polish philosophers and logicians. I think probably in Przegląd Philosophiczny,
Yes.
1 or 2 paragraphs or
Yes.
1 or 2 sides.
It is
Will that
included.
be included among
Yeah.
the works, because it, sometimes really important
Yes.
things get said there, and the original manuscript has disappeared.
Yeah, a lot of them are included. I'm not sure about like all of them. but those which were published in Przegląd Filozoficzny and also in Ruch Filozoficzny, there was like autoreferat. This is a name like of that. So all those which were the result of the sessions of the Polish philosophical societies and stuff like that. These are included in the bibliographies, and also after the war there was also this same like kind of activity was still ongoing from, for example, in Toruń, and we also included those after like post-war. Short, sometimes short, very short, because they sometimes have like half of page, but and a lot of them are also available online. So you will be able to read it if you would want. So yes, we tried to, well, not me, Professor Jadacki included it. So yes. And for example, Blaustein's important talks were only in the form of those autoreferaty. Yeah, so.
Okay, so we've got it.
Okay.
Alessandra, you have something like 10 minutes, unfortunately, because.
Oh, it's enough. It's enough. I think I will present the entry and. Okay. All right. So let's see the. So let's see the representative entry on Twardowski. So this is how it looks like. We have content, so you can click wherever you want to go with the picture. Here on the right side, we have, right now it looks like that. In the future we will see. So concepts, theories, conceptions, and disciplines. So this was what is listed in the paper version, what was chosen as the most important concepts, results, and disciplines that was developed by the member of the Lwów-Warsaw School. And I don't know if this function is already available, but we plan, like, if someone was, for example, if a member of the Lwów-Warsaw School worked on epistemical absolutism, you would be able to click here, and you will see the names of people who was working on this problem. So this was the basic idea behind it. So here we have like first part is like the very short fragment with the main information about the members, so the place in the Lwów-Warsaw School. So here we have a founder, of course, but normally it is a student of Twardowski, Ajdukiewicz, etc. Then we have research areas. So in Twardowski we have descriptive psychology, logic, semiotic, etc. Main conceptions. So here we have clarity, the postulate of clarity and independent ethics, and main results. So here we have actions and products, etc. Then we have biography. So Professor Brożek already said what it includes. So the name of birth, death, also the name of parents, with including the surname of a mother, and the schools the person attended, the title of the doctoral dissertation, and the title of habilitation, if there was any. And also we have various informations that may be interesting. In case of Twardowski, you can see that he was a father-in-law of Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz, for example. So you can learn some interesting facts. And then there is a description of like the main results of their work, so more detailed description. In case of Twardowski, of course, it is very, very long. And like the organization of the page, of course, and also the organization of the page will allow you to read on a smartphone, of course. So you will not have to have a laptop. And then in the end, we have a biography. sorry, you know what I mean, when there is the following structure. So first we have the works that so other bibliographies that were made by other people. So for example, you can see in the case of Twardowski, the Gromska's bibliography is available. I will have to move it if I want to click, I think. So we'll see later. And then we have the main bibliography. So we have books. We see that in the case of Twardowski, there are several books which are already available online. Unfortunately, Zur Lehre is only in German for the moment. And then we have books that were edited by them. These are the collections of their works. And in case of Twardowski, we already have some which are available, which you would be able to read it when you want. And then we have papers. So in the case of papers, generally most of the papers that were published before the Second World War are already available online. We have very, I think, fruitful development of digital libraries, digital repositories. So the laws of authorship are not are not how to say it, restricted on those things very often because they are already old, and there are probably other reasons. So a lot of papers of the most this fundamental representatives of the Lvov-Warsaw School will be available. So you can see that in the case of Twardowski, all of this in color is already linked. Then we have texts that were not scientific. So because many of the Lvov-Warsaw School members were active in politics or in various institutions, etc. So they also produced such publications. And in case of Twardowski, we also have some of those kind of papers here. And also correspondence is included in that part. We also have literature, because some of Lwów-Warsaw School members produced, I don't know, poems like Kotarbiński, for example, and other artists, more like say artistic
Novels,
yeah. So in case of Twardowski, we don't have any, but other people have them. Then there are translations, because Lwów-Warsaw School was also prominent in terms of translating original philosophical works. And some of the translations are also in open repositories. Those, unfortunately, I didn't find them, but maybe in the future we will link them too. And in the end, you have the works that were written about the members of the Lwów-Warsaw School. Of course, there are not all the works, because it would be impossible. So this is only a selection of those. And very often we already also have a lot of they are also quite well available. So this is how the bibliography looks like. So in the end, we also will include the function when you can just copy the reference if you want to use it in your work. And it is all open access, of course. And in the end, this is also a very basic version, but you can see that some of the main features. So what type of entry is this? What type of license, the language, the places which are important for this person, the institutions which are important. So universities, but in the future we will see, because they were engaged in various institutions. And here we are connected entries. And that is, there are like all Twardowski students. So if so in this part, if someone was a teacher and had a student in the Lwów-Warsaw School, so you can already go, for example, I don't know, to Ajdukiewicz if you click here, or not. Yes. Okay. So, and this is an entry of Ajdukiewicz. So this is how this looks like. So we tried to, as Professor Brower.
Smiling.
Yeah. So, so right now this is the stadium of the project, but it will be we will probably developing it in the future. So I think that's the main things here. Thank you.
I would like to thank once again Alexandra very much for her work, but also Robert because his work and the members of his team is also exceptional. Academicon worked in many projects with us, including in Edita of Kazimierz Twardowski, but Encyclopedia is probably the biggest project so far. And also Academicon works on these 5 books for the our anniversary of the Lvov-Warsaw School, which also will be published very soon. I think I put a little bit too much work on on the on Academicon, but we will succeed in the nearest future, let's say. Okay, thank you, and if there are any questions, please, Peter.
First of all, bravo or bravi. This is an amazing project. There's nothing like it elsewhere in the world. So congratulations, even on having the idea, let alone getting this far along with it. Secondly, and this is not really serious, I missed something in Twardowski, his coat of arms. He was an aristocrat and had a coat of arms. Can we have a picture of it, please?
It is invariant.
Yes.
He was an aristocratic, so there is an information that he was, you know, this complex name and so on. Yeah, but there will be, you know, a separate volume with iconography and all pictures, group pictures, individual pictures, and also some additional pictures like graves of these representatives, and also some of the doctoral diplomas will be included there. I think that is a very good idea to include also Twardowski's son. Okay. Yeah, yes, we've got it. But I think Peter knows that what it looks like because it was included in several publications on Twardowski. Okay, and we really have little time because we want to be at 7 o'clock. We have this concert, which is quite far away from here, and we still have a dinner. So, but if okay.
Który organizowałam w Paryżu, ewaluował jego jakość. Z tego tam jest przynajmniej 8 filozofów. Czy oni zostali...
Yes, all which were...
Widziałam, ale...
Okay, yes. If they were somehow affiliated with Czerzowski, for instance, they wrote a PhD or at least master degree by Czerzowski. Yeah, I know. But you know, musieliśmy przyjąć jakieś kryterium, więc musieliśmy przyjąć coś takiego, że albo ktoś napisał magisterium, albo doktorat. Jeżeli ktoś tylko uczęszczał na wykłady, to nie było możliwe włączyć wszystkich takich osób, bo encyklopedia musiałaby mieć, nie wiem, setki tysięcy po prostu wejść. Także myśmy przyjęli takie kryterium, że do encyklopedii wchodzi ktoś, kto napisał doktorat lub magisterium, plus parę takich osób, które naprawdę były wybitnie związane ze szkołą, jak Błachowski, ale tego doktoratu nie miały, prawda? Czy Bocheński. A to jest piękna rzecz, ale jeżeli nie napisał, to moglibyśmy w ten sposób pójść i powłączać. Po prostu musieliśmy przyjąć. Yeah, we had to have a hard criterion. Yeah, I know. Yes, I know. It would be great. But as I said, if these people, if these people wrote PhDs or a master thesis by one of Twardowski's students, they are of course included. And also there are beautiful pictures of this philosophical circle from Wilno included into iconographical part. Because what Czerzowski did in Wilno was something incredible. And it was so fast developing center in the 30s, and it's so sorry that it was ended so suddenly.
A pan Wasilewski, który to wszystko spisywał, zmarł 5 lat temu.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so thanks for the opportunity to present this project. We hope that it will be ended quite soon. Yes, with our online participants, we will meet tomorrow at 10, so see you all. And now for our participants.